on this day in Seventh Day Adventist history, January 8, 1872. The Millerite message came to Rochester, New York in 1843 and soon spread to Port Gibson. The message was based on the preaching of William Miller and predicted that Christ would return about the year 1843, which was later refined to October 22, 1844. This belief was based on the day-year principle and an interpretation of the 2300 days mentioned in Daniel 8:14, which predicted that the sanctuary would be cleansed. The Millerites understood this verse to point to Christ's return to cleanse the earth. Hiram Edson, born in 1806, a Methodist, heard and accepted the message of an evangelistic series. On the last day of the series, Edson was impressed to visit a dying neighbor and asked for his healing in the name of the Lord. He followed through on this thought, entering the neighbor's home late that night and laying his hands on him. It is said that the neighbor immediately threw off his blankets, got up out of bed, and began praising God. Soon the whole household was doing the same. That same night, Edson believed that the Lord told him to begin preaching the Advent message to his friends and neighbors. He struggled with the thought for days, finding this more difficult to do even than to heal the sick. He finally acted on his behalf, and soon 300 or 400 of his neighbors accepted the Advent message as well. Edson spent October 22, 1844 with friends, waiting for the event. He was heartbroken, and when Jesus did not return as expected, he later wrote, "Our fondest hopes and expectations were blasted, and with such a spirit of weeping came over us as I had never experienced before. It seemed, after the loss of all earthly friends, could have been no comparison. We wept and wept till the day dawned." As the hours passed, Edson reflected on the events of the previous year. He believed he had been given the power to heal the sick. He had seen many hundreds of his friends turn to Jesus as a result of his preaching. His confidence soon returned, and he suggested that he and some friends visit some nearby Adventists or Millerites to encourage them. On the morning of October 23, 1844, they walked through Edson's cornfield to avoid the mocking cheers of the neighbors who had refused to believe the Advent message. It was in this cornfield that Edson saw a vision. In this vision, Edson came to understand that the cleansing of the sanctuary meant that Jesus was moving from the holy place to the most holy place in the heavenly sanctuary, and not the second coming of Jesus to earth. We started, and while passing through a large field, I was stopped about midway through the field. Heaven seemed open to my view, and I distinctly and clearly understood that our high priest, coming out of the most holy of the heavenly sanctuary, to come to this earth on the 10th day of the 7th month, at the end of the 2300 days. He, for the first time, entered on that day the second apartment of the sanctuary, and that he had a work to perform in the most holy place before the coming to this earth. Edson shared what he had saw and what he believed with many of the local Adventists, who were greatly encouraged by his account. As a result, Edson began studying the Bible with 2 other believers in the area, O.R.L. Crozier and Franklin B. Hahn, who published their findings in a paper called The Day's Dawn. This paper explored the biblical parable of the 10 virgins, which describes a group of women waiting at a wedding for the bridegroom to arrive. The bridegroom symbolized Christ and was delayed, of which the men saw a parallel to their own situation. They attempted to explain why the bridegroom had tarried. The article also explored the concept of the Day of Atonement and what the authors called our chronicle of events. The findings published by Crozier and Hahn and Edson led to a new understanding about the sanctuary in heaven. Their papers explained how there was a sanctuary in heaven that Christ, the heavenly high priest, was to cleanse. The believers understood the cleansing to be that of the 2300 days in Daniel, and was referring to. This distinctive Seventh-day Adventist belief is now known as the investigative judgment. Crozier's account of Edson's visions came into the possession of James White and Joseph Bates, the latter of whom visited Edson in New York and converted him to the Seventh-day Sabbath. At the close of the revival in 1855, Edson was ordained as a local church elder. For many years after the great disappointment, when Jesus did not come as expected, he continued as a lay preacher, working with Joseph Bates, J. N. Andrews, and John Loughborough. He continued to farm in the summer to pay his expenses. In 1850, Edson sold his Port Gibson farm to help support the Sabbatarian movement, and sold a second farm 2 years later in Port Byron, New York, so that James White could purchase a printing press for Rochester, New York. The Sabbatarian Adventist movement was formally organized as a Seventh Day Adventist church in 1863. Edson was credentialed as a minister in 1870. On this day, January 8, 1882, Hiram Edson died.